Every time humanity tried to leave the solar system, something on the moon destroyed the ship. It didn't matter how many times they tried. It didn't matter how much they spent, how many years they worked, how many people gave their lives to get there. Every single time, in the same fraction of a second, the same thing happened. The ship came apart. The dream came apart with it. And whatever was sitting on the far side of the moon sent a pulse lasting exactly 1.3 milliseconds, just long enough to do the job, and went quiet again. For weeks, we thought it was a prison. We were wrong, and we almost destroyed the one thing standing between humanity and extinction before we figured that out. This is what actually happened. Daniel Ibarra was 34 years old when the Aurora launched, and he had not slept properly in 11 days. That was normal for him in the final countdown window. Not heroic, just fact. His colleagues at Mission Control called him the Bloodhound, which he found slightly embarrassing because it made the work sound more dramatic than it was. He didn't have a gift for signals analysis. He just didn't trust anything until he had looked at it 3 times, which meant he caught things other people missed, which meant he was the last one to leave every night and the one who got called when something didn't add up. His mother called it stubbornness. She was probably right. He had grown up in Guadalajara watching every launch, every test flight, every incremental step toward what his generation came to call the project, the 40-year international effort to build a ship that could travel at the speed of light. His father had worked assembly on the 3rd-generation warp coil prototypes, low-level fabrication work, anonymous, never in any history book. Daniel had joined the project at 26 as a junior analyst. 8 years later, he was Chief Signal Integrity Officer for the most important mission in human history. Standing at his station in Mission Control with a coffee going cold beside him, watching the countdown and telling himself that everything he was looking at was clean. All nominal, all nominal, all nominal. He had 2 photographs taped to the corner of his monitor. One was his daughter, Sophia, who was 3 and had her mother's eyes and his stubborn jaw. The other was a picture of deep space, the Hubble successor's image of a galaxy cluster 12 billion light-years away, taken when Daniel was a teenager, the one that had made him understand for the first time how far there was to go. He looked at both photographs every morning when he sat down. On the morning of the Aurora launch, he found himself looking at them longer than usual. He couldn't explain why. The Aurora was magnificent, a quarter-mile of precision engineering, every system checked and rechecked, designed to fold space around itself the way you might wrap a hand around a stone. Not moving through space, but moving with it, the universe bending to accommodate the ship's passage. The physics had been proven in simulations 10,000 times. The testing had been exhaustive. The team was the best that had ever existed. At 0900 GMT, the Aurora initiated its translation sequence. At 0900 and 4 seconds, Daniel's screens went white, and then showed him numbers that made no physical sense, and then showed him nothing at all. The ship was gone. Not damaged, not disabled. Gone in a flash that his instruments registered as lasting less than a millisecond. The most expensive and sophisticated vehicle ever built by human beings had simply ceased to exist between 1 second and the next. The silence in Mission Control lasted almost 30 seconds. Daniel stood at his station and did not move. He was listening to the silence the way you listen to a sound that stops when you reach for it, trying to hold the shape of it, to understand what it was made of. Around him, people began shouting, moving, collapsing. Someone near the back of the room made a sound he had never heard a person make and hoped never to hear again. He looked at the photograph of Sophia. He looked at the photograph of the galaxy cluster. Then he looked at his screens and started working. The official finding was catastrophic structural failure, unforeseen resonance in the warp coils. The press ran with it. Committees convened. Inquiries launched. 17 months of rebuilding, retesting, rechecking. The Aurora 2 rose from its gantry on a Tuesday morning and achieved a total flight duration of 6 milliseconds before the same thing happened in the same way. Aurora 3rd. Same result. Aurora the 4, completely redesigned from the foundation up, incorporating everything learned from the first 3 failures. Same result. Daniel had been living in his office by the time of the Aurora 4. Not metaphorically, he had a cot in the corner and a photograph of Sophia that had replaced the one on his monitor because he'd stopped going home enough to remember what home felt like. His marriage was in the condition that marriages get into when one person is present and the other one has gone somewhere unreachable, and both people can see it happening, and neither one can stop it. He and Mara spoke on the phone every few days, careful and careful, like people walking around something fragile on the floor. "You're going to figure it out," she told him, the night before the Aurora 4 launch. "I don't know that." "I do." She had more faith in him than he had earned, probably. He carried that thought with him the next morning when the Aurora 4 lit up and died in the same fraction of a second as all its predecessors, and the silence in Mission Control was quieter than ever because people had started to run out of words for what they were feeling. The lead engineer on Aurora 4, Dr. Wei Chen, told the Science Council the next day what everyone in that room already suspected. This wasn't a design problem. The ships weren't failing. Something was stopping them. He was removed from the project within 48 hours, officially health reasons, unofficially because the people running the program were not yet prepared to say out loud what they were all beginning to believe. Daniel was prepared to say it. He just needed the data first. He had been running a separate analysis for months, quietly, off the official investigation track. Everyone else was looking inward, at the ships, the coils, the engineering. He looked outward. Every external sensor feed from every explosion, satellite telemetry, observatory data, deep space antenna arrays, looking for the signal, the thing that didn't belong. He found it at 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday, alone in his office with the building empty and rain hitting the windows and a photograph of Sophia watching him from the corner of his monitor. A pulse, 1.3 milliseconds long, appearing in a frequency band no natural source produced. Showing up in the data each time, always beginning 0.7 milliseconds before each ship's translation sequence initiated, as if the source could predict when they were about to move, and ending the instant the ships ceased to exist. He traced the origin with 4 antenna arrays and triangulation calculations that took him 3 days to complete and verify 3 times. The moon. Specifically, coordinates on the lunar far side that matched almost exactly a location flagged in an unreviewed survey report he found buried in a database. 14 days earlier, a routine drone had photographed a massive geometric shadow in a crater near the South Pole. The object casting it was estimated at 6 to 9 kilometers in length. Perfectly symmetrical, partially buried. No formation in the geological literature resembled it. It was not a natural formation. Daniel filed his report at 4:30 a.m., and then sat in his chair and looked at the photograph of the far galaxy cluster for a long time. 12 billion light-years away, those galaxies. He thought about the distance. He thought about what might have had the time to build something on Earth's moon and leave it there and be elsewhere now, long gone, while humanity was still arguing about rocket fuel. The world's governments learned about the structure with impressive speed, which told him they had been quietly preparing for exactly this scenario. Probes launched within the week. Images came back within a month. The structure was everything the shadow suggested and more. A colossal construction of alien geometry, extending 15 kilometers below the lunar regolith, its exposed sections rising nearly 2 kilometers, its surface a single continuous material that no impactor could mark and no instrument could see through. It showed 0 activity, 0 emissions, 0 response to any signal. The scientific consensus, released after 6 months of study, called it an archaeological remnant and described it as apparently dormant. Daniel thought, a dormant system does not emit precisely timed signals correlated with human launch events. But officially, the Aurora project was suspended pending further study. Unofficially, the world's governments were doing something else entirely. The decision to destroy the structure was made in Geneva, in a room swept for listening devices 3 times that morning, by people who had decided that an alien technology capable of eliminating warp-capable ships deserved exactly one response: elimination. The logic was clear to everyone in that room. An incomprehensible weapon of unknown origin, actively preventing human expansion, with no means of communication and no way to know when its programming might decide that stopping ships wasn't enough. Better to destroy it first. Daniel submitted 4 separate reports arguing against the strike. He presented them in 3 formal briefings and one extremely uncomfortable meeting with a general who outranked him by several orders of magnitude and had very little interest in his analysis. His argument was simple. A system that had access to technology capable of disassembling a warp-capable ship in a millisecond could certainly do far worse if it chose to. The fact that it had not chosen to, that it had, 4 separate times, neutralized ships without touching the planet, without harming the launch crews, without any collateral action whatsoever, suggested a level of restraint that did not belong to a weapon. Weapons did not show restraint. Whatever this was, it was making choices. Nobody disagreed with his logic. They just also weren't stopping the strike. He called Mara the night before. She answered on the second ring, which meant she'd been awake. "I can't tell you what's happening tomorrow," he said. "I know. I think we're making a mistake. Can you stop it?" "No." She was quiet for a moment. "Then come home when it's over. However it goes." He thought about that for a long time after he hung up. The strike package comprised 847 orbital weapon systems across 4 orbital planes, every one of them slaved to a single fire control network, programmed to discharge within a 0.3-second window. The combined energy output, the models said, could fracture the lunar crust in the target area. It had taken 11 weeks to coordinate. It required more diplomatic engineering than weapons engineering, getting 17 nations to point their orbital arsenals at the same target and trust each other not to hold back. Daniel stood at his station at 0600, all nominal, all nominal, all nominal. At 0600 and 0.1 seconds, every display and mission control went dark, not a power failure. The building was running, the screens were live, they were simply receiving nothing. Every satellite, every antenna, every feed connecting them to anything beyond the walls. Gone. Silent. Not jammed in any detectable way. Just absent, the way a word is absent when you've forgotten it and know it's there but cannot reach it. He sat down on the floor in a corner of mission control, back against the wall, and waited. It was not a rational decision. His legs just stopped being interested in holding him up. Around him, 600 of the most accomplished people on Earth cycled through panic and prayer and shouting and silence. Someone tried to reach the White House on a landline and got nothing. Someone else walked outside to see if the moon was still there. It was. 67 minutes after the displays went dark, they came back. The feeds were clean. The satellites were clear. The weapons systems, all 847 of them, were intact, nominal, reporting green across every parameter, and every single one of them was pointing at Earth. Daniel stood at his station and looked at this for a long time without speaking. He thought of Sophia. He thought of Mara. He thought of 8 billion people going about their lives right now, no idea. He thought about the structure on the moon, which had just demonstrated in 67 minutes that it could have ended everything if that was what it wanted, and had chosen instead to do this, to hold the gun to humanity's head and not pull the trigger, to show them what it was capable of and then wait. It was making a point. He was certain of it. He just couldn't read it yet. Governments went to bunkers. Override commands were transmitted to the weapons systems. The weapons acknowledged the commands and ignored them. Whatever had rewritten their targeting firmware had done it below any layer human engineers had written, in some stratum of the hardware that their code couldn't reach. You could talk to the weapons. They just wouldn't listen. A week passed, the weapons didn't fire. Then 2 weeks, then a month, then 6 weeks. The planet held its breath. Children still went to school because children needed to go to school. Economies still functioned because economies couldn't stop without collapsing. People adapted the way people always adapted, carrying the dread of it alongside the ordinary business of living. Daniel slept 4 hours a night on his office cot and spent the rest of his time staring at data he couldn't fully decode, looking for the message he was certain was there. On the 67th day, the weapons moved, all 847 of them simultaneously, pivoting from their Earth-facing alignment to a new vector, precise, coordinated, unanimous, pointing toward a single point in deep space. Daniel had the astronomical query running before anyone else had thought to look. The target coordinates resolved to a region 2.3 light-years out, roughly in the direction of Alpha Centauri. He pulled the deep space imaging feeds, waited 4 minutes for the first image. When it appeared on his screen, he looked at it for a long time. A point source, moving. The velocity calculation came back while he was still staring, a significant fraction of light speed. The trajectory calculation came back 18 seconds later, 11 months to Earth. The object was 2 kilometers across, denser than any natural body had a right to be, opaque to radar, spectrally unlike any known material. It did not respond to signals. It did not deviate from its trajectory in response to solar radiation pressure that should have been nudging it. It came on with the flat indifference of something that had been aimed from very far away by something that knew exactly what it was doing. The impact energy, if it reached Earth, would be 40 million times greater than the asteroid that had ended the Cretaceous period. Daniel called Mara. "You need to take Sophia to your mother's place," he said. She understood immediately because she was smart and had been paying attention. "How bad?" "Bad. Are you coming home?" He looked at the photograph of Sophia on his monitor. He looked at the photograph of the far galaxy cluster. He thought about what that cluster looked like now, 12 billion years later. Whether the galaxies in it had found what they were looking for, whether anything in them had survived long enough to find out what was out there. "Not yet," he said. "I'm sorry." The 11 months that followed were the strangest and most human period in history. Civilization continued because the alternative was to simply stop, and humans turned out to be extraordinarily bad at simply stopping. The planetary defense apparatus ran double shifts. 6 orbital laser platforms were assembled in 8 months of around-the-clock work. Interceptors launched in waves. The math was done and redone, and nobody liked the answers, but they kept doing the math because that was what you did when there was nothing else to do. Daniel worked signals through all of it, watching the object, watching the moon, which remained silent, trying to read the message he was certain existed across the sequence of events. The explosions, the silence, the redirected weapons, the 67 days, the 67 minutes. The same number. It had to mean something. He couldn't reach it. The interception was planned for a 0.5 days from Earth. Every weapon system available, coordinated, maximum yield, simultaneous discharge. The Aurora engineers who had built the most powerful energy systems humanity possessed were now pointing them at something that had come to kill them. On the morning of the interception, Daniel stood at his station. All nominal, all nominal, all nominal. At 0800, the fire command transmitted. 11 seconds of Earth's maximum energy output struck the object in a single coordinated pulse. The sensor team described it afterward as like watching a small star ignite in the outer solar system. The object did not deviate, did not slow, did not show any sign that it had noticed. Second attempt, same result. Third attempt, with systems that weren't supposed to be ready for another 3 months, field tested for 11 hours and launched anyway. Same result. At 13:47 GMT, the fire plan was exhausted. Nothing left to fire. 4 days from Earth and coming. Daniel stood at his station and thought about his daughter. He thought about what she would look like at 10, at 15, at 25, at all the ages he could imagine for her that now seemed uncertain. He thought about the photo of the far galaxy cluster, and whether any intelligence in it had gone through something like this, and whether they had survived it, and whether it had changed them. Then the moon lit up. It started at the structure's visible edge, a dim amber brightening over 90 seconds into something that saturated every optical sensor on the lunar surface. Then the orbital telescopes caught it. The light was collimating, focusing. A million-year-old installation was gathering itself, drawing on reserves accumulated across geological time, pointing everything it had at a target 4 days away. The beam lasted 2.7 seconds. It reached the object in those 2.7 seconds, and the object was gone. A brief thermal bloom, an expanding shell of disassociated matter, and then empty space where extinction had been. When the cameras turned back to the moon, the structure wasn't there. Not destroyed, not damaged. The surface red as a shallow depression and fine particulate. It had spent everything, every reserve, every stored joule of whatever energy it ran on, accumulated across a time span that made human civilization look like an afternoon. It had given what it had to give. The giving had consumed it. Daniel sat down slowly in his chair. His senior analyst came and stood beside him. For a while, neither of them spoke. "It was never a prison," she said. "No. It was keeping us here. All those years. All those ships." She shook her head. "It was protecting us." Daniel thought about the Aurora, about the 17 people who had died in prototype accidents before the first launch, about the engineers who had given their careers to something that kept blowing up, who had died not knowing why, about the 4 ships destroyed in 4 seconds of light-speed pulse again and again, and how it had felt like a wall, how it had felt like imprisonment, how the natural human response to a wall was to try to break through it, and how completely that instinct had almost gotten them all killed. "It knew what was out there," he said. "It knew because whatever built it had already been through it. They understood what the universe was, well, not what was in it, what came looking." He paused. "They built something to keep us safe until we were ready. They couldn't tell us directly. Maybe they were gone by then. Maybe there was no way to communicate across that much time." He looked at the empty coordinates on his screen. "So they built a Guardian, and the Guardian worked exactly the way it was designed to. And we attacked it. And we attacked it," he said, "and it still saved us." He thought about the 67 minutes, the 67 days, the same number, a choice, he was now certain, not a coincidence, a message built into the timing, patient and repeated from something that had been waiting longer than his species had existed. "I could. I won't. Think about why." He thought about the weapons pointed at Earth that never fired, the most restrained warning in history, an alien system with incomprehensible power spending the last of its energy not on retaliation, but on the thing it had been built to do. He picked up his phone. "Is she awake?" he asked when Mara answered. "She's been up for an hour. She wants to talk to you." Sophia came on the line and told him about a bird she had seen from her grandmother's window and asked when he was coming home, and he said soon, and meant it for the first time in a very long time. After he hung up, he sat for a moment looking at both photographs, his daughter's eyes, 12 billion light years of ancient light. Then he called the project director for Aurora Phi, whose development had been quietly continuing through all of it in New Mexico, and said, "Start the clock." Not because it was safe out there. It wasn't. They knew that now in a way they hadn't before, not as an abstract possibility, but as a fact delivered in real time at a cost that had no precedent. But the structure was gone. The Guardian that had kept them here, safe and contained and alive, was gone, and whatever had come for them once could come again, from somewhere farther away, and next time there would be nothing on the moon to stop it. You could not defend against what you could not see. You could not see from the bottom of a gravity well. The stars were not an ambition. They were the only real answer to the question the last year had posed. They had been kept here for a reason. Kept until they were ready. He wasn't certain they were ready now, but he thought they were readier than they had been. They had learned what the universe cost. They had seen what waited in the dark. Outside, the stars were the same as they had always been. Patient, vast, indifferent to whether anything looking up at them was brave enough to come. And somewhere in that darkness, something had already noticed them.
So, that's the end of this story, but there are plenty of other great ones right here. Before you go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that little bell.